My name is Clara. I am 30 years old, and I live in Denver. This Christmas, I imagined everything would unfold as it always had before. Family gathered around the long table, chatter weaving through the air, the Christmas tree shimmering softly in the corner. But instead, what I received was a short message from my mother. Just your sister's family this year. We're keeping it small. 8 simple words. Yet they landed like a stone in my chest. Sharp enough to remind me that I had never truly been welcomed. Never really belonged. Memories I had buried clawed their way back instantly. The Christmas mornings when my name wasn't on any gift. The dinners where I was pushed to the children's table, even after I was no longer a child. The moments when every achievement of mine was drowned beneath one name. Violet, the flawless sister. Violet, the golden one. The daughter who never failed. I didn't argue. I didn't plead. I typed one word in reply in joy. But as I set my phone down, a flame sparked within me. I would not spend another holiday alone in this small, cold apartment. I had a place, one my family knew nothing about. A mountain lodge in Aspen, worth $5 million, that I had built quietly over the years. Not to show off, but to prove something to myself. That I was strong enough, determined enough to create my own table when theirs had no seat for me. And this year, for the very first time, I would open its doors. Not to those who had ignored me. Not to those who had silenced me. But to everyone who had ever been cast aside, who knew the ache of being forgotten. I would host a Christmas where love wasn't measured against perfection. A gathering built on choice, not comparison. Have you ever been pushed away by your own family? Have you ever felt the sting of being the forgotten one? The unnecessary child? If you have, I want you to stay with me in this story. Because what I discovered may echo inside you too. And maybe, just maybe, it will help you find the strength to build your own table. When I look back, I realize the shadow of my sister had followed me since childhood. In my parents' eyes, Violet was the flawless golden girl. She was radiant, sociable, and endlessly praised. I, on the other hand, was introduced with a dismissive smile. This is Clara, Violet's sister. A line repeated so many times that it became the entirety of who I was. Not only to others but eventually to myself. Holidays should have been filled with laughter, warmth, and joy. But for me, they were heavy with silence and exclusion. I remember being 14, sitting by the Christmas tree, lights blinking across the living room. The pile of presents stacked so high. I thought surely one must be mine. Violet unwrapped a delicate bracelet, and my mother pressed a kiss to her cheek. You deserve this, she told her. Because you make us proud. I kept my smile steady, pretending not to notice that as the last piece of wrapping paper fell, there was nothing left for me. My mother glanced my way with unease and murmured, You're older now. You don't really need toys anymore. I nodded as if it didn't matter. But inside, something fractured. It wasn't about toys. It was about worth. And mine, in their eyes, never seemed enough. The favoritism seeped into everything. When Violet became captain of the cheerleading team, my parents threw a party. When I won first place at the science fair, my mother only said, That's nice. Don't stay up too late. My father didn't bother to look at the report I had worked on. Too busy bragging to the neighbors about Violet's next accomplishment. Whenever I tried to share something that made me proud, a computer I had rebuilt from scraps, a radio I had brought back to life, my words hung in the air, unanswered, before the conversation shifted to Violet's debate team or her upcoming performance. Slowly, I learned to retreat, to shrink, to bury myself in the garage where the smell of solder and grease became my companions. Even then, I still asked myself at night, am I just the unnecessary child? That question carved itself into me, echoing louder with each passing year. One of the most haunting memories came when I was 17. A letter arrived that could have changed everything. A full scholarship to one of the most prestigious universities in the country. My hands trembled as I carried it into the living room, barely able to breathe from excitement. My father glanced at the letter, then at me, his words cut sharper than any blade. Stanford? That's too far away. Are you sure? Violet will still be nearby. Much more convenient. In that moment, I froze. I stood there with proof of a future most could only dream of, yet all they could think about was convenience, proximity, and of course, Violet. Those wounds never faded. They hardened into weight I carried into adulthood. I worked harder, stayed up later, pushed myself further. And still, no matter what I accomplished, I remained invisible in their eyes. I realized bitterly that even if I cured a disease or built something remarkable, my parents would still see only one daughter worth boasting about. Violet. I don't blame her. She lived the role handed to her. But the imbalance of love, the way our parents divided affection like it was rations, made me into an outsider. So when that message came years later, cutting me out of Christmas entirely, it was no surprise the old scars split open again. But here is the strange truth. The very moments of abandonment became the fire that fueled me. Had I not been left behind, I never would have buried myself in circuits and wires, discovering my passion for technology. Had I not been pushed aside, I might never have left our small town to carve out my own path. Pain forged me, even as it broke me. Leaving Indiana for California was a turning point etched into my soul. I remember stepping onto campus for the first time, suitcase heavy, nerves buzzing. My parents didn't even treat it as a milestone. The night before I left, my father simply said, "You'd be better off choosing a closer school, like Violet." Those words clung to me, even as I tried to walk away from them. At Stanford, I had no safety net. Every dollar mattered. Books, food, housing, all fell on my shoulders. I rented cramped rooms, slept on sofas, sometimes on the floor, waking up stiff but determined. Dinner was often instant noodles, or leftovers from a campus cafe. I remember crunching dry ramen from the packet while tears blurred my vision. Not because of the salty taste, but from the sheer exhaustion of it all. Still, resilience took root in me. I found myself drawn to logistics and technology. At 23, I started my first company. It was small, just a few of us building a platform to optimize freight transportation. No investors believed in a young woman without family connections. I juggled bills, scraped together salaries, and came dangerously close to bankruptcy. I'll never forget one week. The company account showed only a few hundred left, and payroll was due. Desperate, I pitched a hospital over and over, hardly sleeping for 3 nights. If they said no, the dream would collapse. When they finally agreed to a trial, it felt like a lifeline had been thrown. That moment carried us forward. Then came the pandemic. The world was chaos. Hospitals ran short of masks, ventilators, gloves. That was when our platform became indispensable. We built real-time routing, ensuring no hospital went without. A shipment in Texas could be diverted instantly to New York. A truck stuck in Kansas could be rerouted to a state in crisis. My team and I worked 16-hour days, fueled by something bigger than ourselves. Within a year, our reach had expanded to serve more than 50 health systems across the country. Journalists called us the nervous system of the medical supply chain. My name appeared on Forbes 30 Under 30. I stood on stage, plaque trembling in my hands, and thought only one thing: will my parents even read this? The answer was no. Later, when a Fortune 500 company offered to buy us for $120 million, it took me a week to believe the number was real. When the deal closed, I walked out of the office and let the late afternoon sunlight wash over me. For the first time, I had freedom. No more ramen nights. No more fear of unpaid rent. I had built something. I had proved my worth. And yet, in my parents' eyes, nothing had changed. I returned home once, carrying a gift from New York, my heart cautiously hopeful, but the room buzzed only with excitement about Violet, who had just landed her job as an attorney at a prestigious firm. My mother's voice glowed with pride. Violet is so talented. Her boss trusts her completely. I sat there in silence, waiting. When I finally mentioned my company's acquisition, my father gave a faint laugh. Well, that's technology. Complicated stuff. Anyway, let's talk more about Violet. And just like that, I was invisible again. After that day, something inside me shifted. I stopped craving their recognition. I stopped waiting for my father's nod or my mother's praise. Instead of throwing money into things meant to impress, I chose something deeper. I wanted a home, a sanctuary, a place where no one could shut me out or compare me to someone else. That's how I found myself in Aspen, Colorado. The first time I drove into that valley, snow dusting the trees, the Rockies rising like giants around me, I knew I had discovered where my soul could finally breathe. I purchased 42 acres of land from a family moving overseas. The price was $5 million, but to me, it wasn't about money, it was a declaration. A promise to the younger Clara who once sat at the kids' table, unseen. I was building a world of my own. The lodge rose in cedarwood, every beam rich with scent when the sun touched it. The grand hall stretched skyward with a stone fireplace large enough to step inside. A chandelier made from pine hung above, its glow filling the space with warmth. The living room walls were glass from floor to ceiling, framing snow-capped peaks that caught the first morning light like thousands of diamonds. Behind the lodge, a private lake was dug, filled with salmon and sturgeon. In summer, I could fish beneath the sun. In winter, the frozen surface mirrored the violet skies. Inside, I designed 10 bedrooms, each with its own balcony and fireplace. The kitchen gleamed with black granite, the island carved from a single walnut slab. Rows of cast-iron pans lined the wall, a gift from a local chef I hired for guidance. Furniture was chosen carefully: leather sofas, oak tables, wool rugs hand-woven in Navajo Valley. I didn't want flashy opulence. I wanted warmth. A place where people could feel seen. I kept it secret. No posts online. No whispers to my family. Not a single word. Because I knew if they learned of it, they'd twist it. They'd say I got lucky, that someone helped me. Or worse, they'd hand the credit to Violet, as they always had. This lodge was mine, entirely mine. One day, when the time was right, I would reveal it not through argument, but through undeniable presence. Whenever I visited during construction, I stayed for days, sleeping on a pine bed that smelled of paint and sawdust. At night, I'd step onto the balcony, blanket wrapped around my shoulders, and watch the mountains glow silver in the moonlight. The wind howled across the slopes, reminding me of childhood nights spent outside, peering in at a family who didn't want me. But here, things were different. I was no longer outside. I was creating the inside. When the lodge was finally complete, I walked slowly through every room. My hand traced the oak tables, the cedar beams. Each detail whispered the same truth. This was my home. Not the forgotten daughter's home. Not Violet's sister's home. Mine. But then came that Christmas message. The 8 words from my mother that cut me out once more. For a moment, I questioned if it was only me. Maybe they really wanted something smaller this year. Maybe intimacy. Maybe simplicity. I needed the truth. So, I called Rachel, my cousin. She answered with surprise in her voice. I asked her directly, "Did you get an invitation from my parents?" Rachel let out a bitter laugh. Number. They told my mom it was immediate family only. Just Violet and her family. My chest tightened. I asked again. So even Aunt Marianne wasn't invited? Even Grandma? Rachel's voice hardened. No one was. Not even Grandma. She called today furious. She said it hasn't happened in 30 years. I sat back in my chair, the snow falling thick outside my window. So it wasn't only me. They had cut everyone out, leaving only Violet, her husband, her child. Once again, everything circled her. And something inside me snapped free. This was no longer about my pain. This was the truth about how my parents had chosen to live. They had built their entire world around one daughter's glow, casting everyone else into shadow. But I had a choice. I had a lodge. Waiting. I could create something different. A Christmas not built around perfection, but around belonging. I pulled out my phone and texted Rachel. If you and your family want, come to Aspen. My doors are open. Her reply came almost instantly. You have a ranch? Let me ask Mom. If you're serious, we'll come. 20 minutes later, Rachel called back, her voice alive with excitement. We're in, and I think the others will come too. One by one, I made the calls. Cousin Eli in Chicago. Aunt Marianne. Grandma. Each said yes with relief in their voices, as if they had waited for this moment all along. By the end of the night, more than 15 people were coming. For the first time in my life, I wasn't left outside the door. I was the one opening it. The more calls I made, the more I realized this gathering couldn't be thrown together carelessly. It wasn't just about food or decorations. This was my chance to show every forgotten soul in my family that they deserved a holiday that was real. I wanted them to walk into that lodge and feel, perhaps for the first time in years, that they truly belonged. I called a local chef in Aspen, Margaret, a woman known for her Appalachian recipes steeped in patience and tradition. When she stepped into my kitchen for the first time, she ran her hands over the black granite counters, her eyes filling with tears. I've never seen a place that makes me want to light the stove right away, she whispered. I told her exactly what I wanted. A feast in the truest sense. Roasted turkey with fresh herbs, creamy mashed potatoes, tangy cranberry sauce, golden crusted apple pie, thick frothy eggnog poured into ceramic mugs warm enough to cradle in cold hands. Margaret smiled, nodded once, and said, "Leave it to me. No one will leave hungry." Meanwhile, I poured myself into the details. I ordered a 12-foot tree so full we had to climb ladders to hang the ornaments. Gold baubles shimmered between red ribbons, and at the top, a silver star glittered like ice beneath the lights. Outside, I strung hundreds of golden bulbs across the balcony, so that at dusk the entire lodge glowed like a gift box nestled in the snowy valley. Local artisans wove wreaths of pine, berries, and linen strips, their resin mingling with cinnamon and dried orange, filling the air with the unmistakable spirit of Christmas. But it wasn't only about beauty. It was about intention. I prepared every bedroom with personal touches, small details to whisper, "I see you." On Aunt Marianne's nightstand, I left a stack of historical novels tied neatly with twine, along with a handwritten card. "You once told me reading is like living another life." For Rachel's children, I wrapped Lego sets in silver paper, their names written carefully on the tags. For Grandma, I placed imported tea she rarely bought for herself, alongside a wool scarf I had found in a tiny Aspen shop. Even the dining room held no children's table. Only one long table stretched wide, big enough for everyone. No one shoved to the edge. No one turned away from the center. Every seat carried the same worth. In the library, I set up a puzzle table. In the entertainment room, I prepared velvet sofas and loaded a projector with Christmas classics. Popcorn bowls and marshmallows waited, ready for laughter. Outside, a fire pit was stacked high with logs, promising warmth against the snowy night. By the time the eve of their arrival came, the house glowed. Candles scented of cinnamon and vanilla flickered across embroidered linens. Fresh wreaths framed the doors. Cards thanking each guest simply for showing up lay neatly stacked by the fire. That morning, as snow fell thick across the valley, the first car crunched up the driveway. Rachel stepped out, tugging her coat collar tight, her eyes wide as she took in the towering cedar lodge. She spun toward me, voice cracking with emotion. You built an entire world and never told me." I laughed, pulling her into a hug, snowflakes melting into her hair. Her children pressed their faces to the window, eyes glowing at the sight of the 12-foot tree. Within seconds, they bolted inside, squealing at the toy train circling the base. One by one, more cars arrived. Cousin Eli from Chicago, guitar slung across his shoulder. Uncle Ray, whose embrace said more than words ever could. Aunt Marianne, wiping tears as she caught the cedar's fragrance, then clutching the stack of novels waiting for her. Grandma walked slowly into the great hall, her eyes glistening as she looked around. She said nothing, only pressed her trembling hand into mine. Soon the house filled with life. Margaret's voice rose from the kitchen, calling out as her spoon clinked against the pot. "Time to test the cranberry sauce." Eli tuned his guitar on the porch, his first notes glowing like fire in the cold. Rachel and I checked each place card, making sure every seat was just right. When Margaret finally carried the turkey into the room, its skin golden and brushed with herb butter, a hush fell. The aroma swept over the table, warm and irresistible. I laid the carving knife beside it, then handed it to Uncle Ray, whose steady hand always made others feel at home. Mashed potatoes passed from hand to hand. Brussels sprouts hissed faintly on their platter. Bread steamed with garlic and butter. Wine glasses clinked softly as I whispered 4 words. "Thank you for coming." And then, the table came alive. Stories overlapped. Laughter spread like wildfire. Hands reached across to touch shoulders. Old memories resurfaced. The children weren't banished to a noisy corner. They sat among us, asking questions, listening to stories of papier-mâché trees and snowstorms from years long gone. Later, when Margaret set down the apple pie, its crust sparkling with sugar, and I poured eggnog into warm mugs. Grandma placed her hand gently on mine. "You've given us a real Christmas, Clara," she whispered. "For the first time in years, we feel like we belong." Her words cracked something inside me. Not with pain, but with release. For once, I wasn't on the outside. I was the one who had created the center. After dessert, Eli slipped the guitar strap over his shoulder and strummed the first chords of Silent Night. The voices around the table were unpolished, imperfect, but so sincere that even the fire seemed to soften its crackle to listen. When the last note faded, the children clapped wildly, then dashed to the window, pressing their noses against the glass to marvel at the swirling snow. Rachel pulled me toward the tree for a group photo. Tom, who had helped manage the lodge during construction, held the camera steady. The chandelier glowed above us, the fire burned behind us, and in that picture I saw something I had never seen before: my own smile. A smile not forced, not desperate, but real. Soon the family group chat buzzed with snapshots. Children hugging their Lego sets, Grandma sipping her herbal tea, Uncle Ray raising his glass on the porch. For years, that group chat had been nothing more than a place for obligatory birthday wishes. Now it felt alive, filled with warmth. Night fell quickly in Aspen. Tom lit the bonfire by the lake, sparks rising into the dark sky like fireflies. Wrapped in wool blankets, a few of us sat outside, sipping mulled wine. Rachel leaned into me, her voice soft. "Thank you." For the first time, I saw my kid sitting in the right place. Her words sank into me like an overdue balm, healing wounds I thought would never close. When the others drifted back inside, I lingered alone. Only the candles remained, their flames low, the scent of cinnamon thick in the air. Margaret hummed softly as she cleared dishes. Tom stacked wood by the fireplace. I ran my hand along the back of a chair, the edge of the table, the tall window that framed the night. For the first time, I wasn't searching for my place. My place was here, among people who had chosen me, not the perfection of someone else. The next morning, pale light spilled across the living room carpet. My phone buzzed with missed calls: 6 from my mother, 4 from my father, and then a message from Violet. The preview alone made my chest sink. "Really cheap move, Clara. Enjoy your little show." I carried the phone downstairs. Grandma sat by the fire, sipping tea. Her eyes softened when she looked at me. "Last night was beautiful, Clara. The whole family needed it." The phone rang again. My mother. I set it on speaker so Grandma could hear. Her voice came sharp, bristling. "Do you realize what you've done? The entire town is talking about your Christmas gathering. Even the pastor mentioned it this morning. Do you know how we look right now?" I kept my tone steady. "You messaged me that this year it would be only Violet and her family. I hosted my own. I didn't trouble anyone." There was a pause before excuses tumbled out. "That's not what I meant. You're always busy. I thought you wouldn't want the hassle. And Violet, well," I cut her off gently but firmly. "She's always the center, isn't she, Mom?" The air froze. Grandma set her teacup down, her voice rising, low and fierce. "Judy, Robert, enough. You've spent a lifetime neglecting this child. Since she was small, you acted as if she didn't exist. Last night she gave us something you never did: a real Christmas." My father tried to sound calm, but unease cracked his voice. "Mother, you're exaggerating. We only wanted to keep things simple. Violet. She..." Grandma's words sliced through. Simple? What does that mean? To see only one child? To praise one while the other disappears? Last night I sat at Clara's table. We laughed. We sang. We belonged. And no one mentioned Violet. For the first time, it wasn't about your so-called perfection. Silence dragged across the line. My mother's voice returned. Softer now. I never meant to hurt anyone. We just wanted to. No, Judy, Grandma cut in. This isn't about what you meant, it's about who you saw and who you ignored. And Clara has carried the cost long enough. I sat still, my heart pounding. For years, I had silenced those words on my tongue, biting them back while others spoke over me. Now, someone finally said them aloud. The line went quiet. Only the fire crackled. I exhaled slowly. That's enough. We'll talk later if we need to. I ended the call. My chest felt lighter, as if a stone had finally rolled away. Grandma rested her hand on my shoulder, her eyes filled with both sorrow and pride. She didn't need to say more. Her presence was enough. The day after Christmas, the lodge still hummed with warmth. Children sprawled across the living room floor, piecing together the puzzle I had set out. The smell of pine lingered as snow fell heavier, blanketing the world in silence. I sat by the wide window, coffee steaming in my hand, watching smoke rise from the chimney into the gray sky. For the first time, I felt peace instead of longing. But the phone buzzed again. This time it was a message from Violet. A single line. You'll never be me, no matter what house you build. I stared at the words. For years, those sentences would have broken me, sent me into spirals of self-doubt. But sitting there in my lodge, surrounded by people who had laughed and sung with me, her message felt small. She was still clinging to the pedestal our parents had built, not realizing that pedestal had already crumbled. Instead of replying, I slipped the phone into my pocket and joined the children on the floor. Rachel smiled from the sofa, her eyes soft with gratitude. She didn't need to say it. I knew what she felt. We had turned a painful tradition into something new, something worth keeping. Later that evening, after everyone packed up and cars disappeared down the snowy driveway, I wandered through the quiet lodge alone. The tree still glowed. Wrapping paper lay crumpled in corners. The silence felt different now, not empty but full. I walked into the kitchen. Margaret had left me containers neatly stacked in the fridge, labeled in her careful handwriting: turkey stew, cranberry glaze, apple pie. I laughed softly. She had taken care of me as if I were her own. As I cleaned, I found myself reflecting on what Christmas had really meant this year. It wasn't the food, or the lights, or the expensive walls of cedar and stone. It was the truth that I didn't have to wait for someone else to make space for me. I could build it myself, and others who had felt cast aside would come. When I stepped out onto the balcony, the night was crystalline, stars stretched wide, the mountains rising sharp against them. I thought about all those years I had believed I was unnecessary, about every Christmas where I sat silent, invisible. And I realized the lie had never belonged to me. It belonged to those who refused to see me. Tears prickled my eyes, not of sadness, but of release. I whispered into the cold air, as if speaking to the child I once was. You were never unnecessary. You were always enough. The next morning, I began writing letters. To Rachel, to Grandma, to Eli and Marianne, thanking them for trusting me, for showing up, for reminding me what family could truly feel like. Each letter ended the same way. My doors will always be open for you. Weeks later, photos from that Christmas still circled through our group chat. Grandma smiling in her scarf. Rachel's kids building towers from Lego blocks. Eli strumming his guitar while sparks rose from the fire pit. It became clear to me that this was not a one-time gathering. It was the beginning of a new tradition, a new center for those left outside the old one. As for my parents, they stayed silent after that call. I didn't chase them anymore. I no longer needed their recognition or their seat at their narrow table. I had built one wide enough for everyone who mattered. And so, as the snow melted into spring, I knew the lodge would not remain empty. It would hold birthdays, reunions, quiet retreats, maybe even weddings someday. It would become a place of belonging for those who had once been overlooked. Now, if you have ever felt pushed aside, ignored, or made to believe you were less, I want you to hear me clearly. You do not need to wait for their invitation. You do not need to prove yourself to those who refuse to see you. You can build your own table, and when you do, you'll find that those who truly love you will come, bringing laughter, music, and light. Because the truth is, family isn't always the one you're born into. Sometimes, it's the one you create.